Can something like abolition work in an age of the Republican extremism? In response to law enforcement's hands-off approach to the storming of the Capitol on January 6th, some on the Democratic side have demanded harsher policing of the Republican extremism to match the often brutal treatment of the Black Lives Matter and the Democratic protest. That is that is the very people who supported police reform or the outright defunding over the summer that seemed to want a crackdown. But skeptics of defunding were quick to point out the apparent contradiction, and they took the opportunity to dismiss the abolitionist position altogether. As the writer Matthew Iglesias mockingly tweeted, "Surely the answer to yesterday's failures is to defund the Capitol Police and instead hire a squad of social service providers to tackle the real root causes of the violence." Um, but what Iglesias finds absurd, and we find imperative, is thinking in terms of the root causes and non-punitive interventions. That is never ridiculous, but even when the target is the Republican extremism. As a sociologist and an anthropologist who studies social control in the United States, as the person who did the article, it says we know that punishment can radicalize and further alienate people, while the social policy and grassroots community building can diffuse potential violence. The abolitionist philosophy is precisely what is missing from the current conversation. First, we should clear up some misunderstandings. Abolitionists do seek to create a future world in which police and prisons are obsolete. Um, but such long-range commitments do not preclude the practical harm reduction efforts or collaboration with less radical allies. The abolitionists work for incremental improvements, especially interventions that set the stage for more radical change. The abolitionists, for example, would back the immediate aim of removing the white supremacist cops and understanding that it is better to have police officers who are not sympathetic to or supportive of the racist insurrection. An abolitionist perspective would highlight, however, the limitations of the simple personal overhauls. Hiring more black and brown officers, for example, does not change the war on drugs and disproportionate attention to poor and racially segregated neighborhoods, but instead it might serve to further legitimize police presence. And similarly, the removal of racist cops might help um, stifle the next Capitol riot, but that is only a single and long overdue step in the wider making of public safety forces. More generally, abolitionists would endorse a broad analytical scope for diagnosing the problem and for designing interventions, as the abolitionist police scholar Alex Vitelli recently noted on the NPR. Focusing exclusively on individual insurrectionists and local police departments would do little to weaken the Republican extremism around the country. Addressing the root causes of the attempted coup means actively working to transform the political and economic conditions that have allowed the ethno-nationalist and scapegoating ideologies to fester. Granted, such ideologies are not reducible to economic desperation, even if many of them are shaped by it. And many of the currently radicalized may be too deeply entrenched for structural change to impact their understanding of the world. Passing Medicare for All will not keep insurrectionists from storming state capitals during the Biden administration. But abolitionists have long been trying to design the root cause informed immediate interventions. A wealth of research on gun violence and the experience of grassroots organizations shows that targeting those at risk of violence can stop retribution from flowing through the entire social networks. Nonprofits or government agencies should identify people in regions primed for the Republican wing extremism, and then intervene on the ground with counseling and political education, and cash stipends predicated on the non-funding and violence interrupting mentors. De-radicalization programs like Life After Hate offer a complementary example of the root cause informed interventions. This program, in which ex-white supremacists help current adherents leave extremist groups, and they have found success by meeting the human needs for meaning and community. As the ex-white supremacist turned de-radicalizer Shannon Martinez said, I needed an explanation for why the world seemed like a threatening and brutal place for me. I wanted to believe in something that felt like it mattered and was part of something bigger. Abolitionists prioritize such interventions because they work and because the combination of harsh policing and incarceration often backfires. A significant body of social scientific evidence shows that labeling and vilifying social groups entrenches identities It generates self-fulfilling prophecies and offers people fewer like possibilities. Put simply, making a population into a targeted category consistently aids in creating more extremist individuals and groups. In a major 2013 study on the negative effects of the carceral punishment on Chicago youth, the economists found that children punished in correctional facilities were significantly more likely to be incarcerated at the age of 25 than those who were sent, for example, to an in-school detention for the same offense. Since Chicago has a random judge selection system, the study was able to isolate the negative effects of harshness and of punishment. But the abolitionists would push this insight further by seeking fully non-punitive accountability models, such as restorative justice education systems, to more what they call effectively reduce harm um, for the student and the school. But considering such dynamics in how we approach the Republican extremisms in common law sense, is common sense basically. We already know that when people are incarcerated, they affiliate along the racial lines. And this happens officially because prisons are internally segregated by race, and unofficially because many incarcerated people join the race-based gangs. Rounding up and incarcerating pop white supremacists may simply form a bridge to joining the Aryan nations. This danger is all the more likely given that Joe Biden's recent proposal of the new domestic terrorism laws, much as the war on terrorism military interventions radicalized a new generation of combatants, and the rollout of a war on white terror might simply create new and more radicalized white supremacists. But the abolitionist fears go way beyond the creation of more of what they call Republican extremism. Abolitionists also fear the consequences of expanding the policing for black, brown, and undocumented and poor communities. Although a Biden administration may, in this moment, keep attention on the Republican white supremacy as the dangerous other in our midst, even though we have other doubts, a future administration may depict the peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters, anti-war and anti-capitalist activists, environmental organizers, and the like as extremists who require surveillance and confinement, and expanding police powers to combat the Republican extremism could well be turned back on an already targeted community. The palpable differences in how policing is treating the Capitol rioters versus the Black Lives Matter protesters is maddening, but that's not all. They also reveal a deep structural rift that would not be repaired through the same old police policy initiatives, especially ones that ramp up policing and imprisonment. Fighting the Republican extremism is not simply about force; it is a long-term battle over culture, meaning, and belonging. And responding to the Republican dangers knocking at our door does not demand a dismissal of the abolitionist perspective. On the contrary, this alternative version of strong communities and constructive interventions will be essential to keeping us safe in the long run. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, Random Mike, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when the new video comes out, and thanks for listening.